Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. Joining me at the market site in Times Square, New York City, we have Aqulies Larrea. He is the CEO of Larrea Wealth Management. We're going to take a look at Latino-owned business earnings continue to soar year after year. Aqulies, it's great to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Trade Talks, and Latin-owned business earnings jumped 46% year over year. This is according to Biz to Credit. That's an impressive number.
You know what's more impressive? That the applications are up over 46%, and that the average Latino business is making over $497,000. And we're talking about food service and services industries, accommodations. So there's a lot of growth potential. We're in such a narrow segment that I can't imagine that there's not room for 50, 80% growth, and we're going to talk about that.
Yeah, and let's get into that stat, a New York City stat. These numbers that you told me before are absolutely amazing.
It's crazy. Last year, when, well, actually 2 years ago, when I wrote my book, Gail R. Brewer came out with a statistic, and she's the Manhattan Borough president. She came out with a stat saying that 87% of Latina-owned businesses, or women-owned businesses who are Latina, came out over a year ago, and then this year it's over 80% as well. So Latinas are opening businesses and driving the growth here in New York City, along with the tri-state region, because it's not just New York State. City. We're seeing it in New Jersey. We're seeing it in Connecticut as well. Very interesting stats.
Why do you think women are seeing such tremendous growth? I
think they're being forced into it. You know, where Latinas don't fit the traditional corporate thing, or they decide that's not for them, and they want to have a business or leave a legacy for their family, because a lot of these are business owned, and they want to have something to leave their kids as they get older and or retire. So that's something for them. And
I think these are things that we need to pay attention to, whether it's corporate, whether it's retail. By 2050, Latinos will comprise almost 30% of the population. That's according to Popular Bank. That's a tremendous amount. I mean, you know, brand, marketing, advertisers, communications teams have to care about this demographic.
Well, could you imagine this? I'm going to throw something out at you. Could you imagine if the Nasdaq market site all of a sudden comprised 30% were comprised of Latino and Latina-owned businesses? So all of a sudden, 30% went public. Could you imagine the face of the Nasdaq if that were to occur, not only in the Nasdaq, but the other exchanges around the world? It could be an impressive number. And you don't want to be behind the curve on this. You know, this is something you want to be ahead of it. And it's kind of like if you go to a Latino party, they put you to work. If you're not dancing just yet, but they put you to work, but then you go and dance later on. I'd rather be that person who helps out a little bit earlier, because then you're well regarded and have even a better time at the party.
Yeah, well, instead of just the listings business, but I mean, that really is an impressive number, but just the composition of corporations overall, when you think about how ESG and diversity and inclusion are paramount, especially for the Fortune 500 and listed companies.
Yeah, and it's amazing that we're only in 2 sectors right now having an impact, that accommodation and the food services, you know, so, i.e. restaurants, and they're the ones asking for loans. Popular Bank came up with that statistic. I would submit that that statistic would be much higher if different areas started making SBA loans and the like. When I started my business back in 2002, March of 2002, I started with my own money and credit. So there was nothing out there. I mean, there was, but there wasn't. And Latinos have traditionally a tougher time getting that credit because of the lack of knowledge.
Right. And do you think the industry overall is getting better when it comes to more inclusive lending, when it gets better, is getting better in terms of financial literacy for the community?
I do believe so. And I think another thing is happening. We're seeing a watershed event where there are more Latinos in the boardroom. There are more Latinos in positions of power. People my age, I'm 50 years old, who are entering positions of power and helping and giving a leg up to Latinos who really need that help and that knowledge at this point. So we're mentoring, trying to, you know, move the needle forward on this.
All right, well, keep going with the progress.
Excellent.
It's pretty amazing. Thank you so much, Aqulies.
Thank you for having me. Honored.
And thank you for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq.